Hello everyone. Today I'm looking at Jak II. Interesting, it has Roman numerals, implying there's going to be a lot of them, but there were just, I think, 3 in this series, and a kart racing game. But anyway, I digress. Jak II is quite possibly the largest tone shift I have ever seen in the same series of video games. And the way I was thinking about this is that we went from the first game being bright, colorful, action, adventure, kid-friendly to a very distinctly teen demographic, and I can only describe it as going from Banjo-Kazooie to Chronicles of Riddick. We went from Super Mario to Cyberpunk, and there are both good and bad things about that, cheesy and funny things about that. So what happens in this game is at the very beginning you have the same Jak we have at the end of the first game, and they have this if you got 100% of the last game, it opens up this giant portal, and so they kind of sort of use that here, where essentially what happens is they have a machine that turns into a time machine when they end up going through the portal, and it sends them into the future. And so there's this weird thing where they're in the future, and there's also clones or different versions of themselves. So some weird time dilation nonsense is going on. But anyway, in the future, everything is in a giant city. Everything is dystopian. Everything is kind of a corrupt government. It feels, honestly, very cyberpunk. And I was kind of thinking to myself, this game almost feels more cyberpunk than actually cyberpunk. And just the mechanics in the actual city itself are really interesting. So that's the biggest change, I'd say. In the first game, you had a series of different hub worlds that you really didn't spend a lot of time in, and you just kind of went to other sub-mission worlds within those hub worlds, and a very sort of linear pattern. You would move between hub worlds like Mario 64. In this one, however, you have one massive hub world with small mission areas around the map that as you revisit them, they change. So one item you get in this game is a hover skateboard thing, and when you go back to that area for a mission, it will essentially allow you to progress differently into that area. I couldn't go here anymore, and that's, of course, where your next mission is. The other thing that's super interesting about this series, or about this game rather, the entire framework of the game, again, it has changed massively. Again, if the last one was like Banjo-Kazooie or Mario 64 or Gex or something, the actual mission structure and pacing of the game actually resembles Grand Theft Auto, in that you start in one section of the city, you're doing missions and quests for this one guy, and then that branches out to a new area where you do more quests, you get more contacts, and that progresses the story along. And I would like to say that this, if anything, I would describe Jak II as also Grand Theft Auto for kids. It's actually really funny how similar they are, and I've just never gotten that vibe about this game before playing it. I'm going to give you some examples. First of all, while the first game was very much about platforming, the vehicles in this game kind of take center stage because you are in the city and transporting, just even getting from mission to mission, you're constantly using vehicles. And so the very first thing that they added in is you can just hijack any vehicle in the game, of which really there are only 5. There's a small motorcycle like a Zoomer, there's a heavy kind of motorcycle, there's a twin based car, and a sort of land speeder car. And by the way, 100% this game was inspired by episode 2, the Coruscant city with the traffic and the flying vehicles. They looked so, the dual pod one literally looks like a Star Wars vehicle. So I'm going to say I absolutely episode 2 inspired. It's written all over, and I think it came out in 2003, which was roughly the same year. But anyway, so vehicles, so you can hijack any vehicle, first of all. Number 2, when you run into civilians, they have that classic stock scream sound effect. And 3, you have these police officers or cops throughout the world who essentially patrol, and you can fight them, and you don't necessarily get a wanted level, but you do get an alert, and they will all get after you until you either drive away, run away, or just fight them until they stop coming. It's definitely not as complex as what Grand Theft Auto 3 around this time, but it's in the same vein. They were very definitely inspired by Grand Theft Auto, and there's a lot of very good inspirations that have seemed to come into this game. Star Wars, GTA, other things like that. And so as the game starts and they've gone through this time warp, the other thing I would also say is that Jack's character has changed a lot, because what happens is they go into the future and immediately Jack is captured by the government, this dystopian totalitarian government, by this guy called the Baron who runs it. And Jack is sent to prison for 2 years. And when Daxter finally finds him and wakes him up and the game is starting, that's when he's a completely different person. I think there's a very funny, if not iconic scene at the beginning where Daxter is pleading for Jack to wake up. And he says, if you've never said anything in your life, say something now. And, he wakes up and he finally says, I'm going to kill Praxis. It's a very... that's really the beginning. That's the shooting point where, again, even like Jack, he looks different up until that point. And by that point, he's been in 2 years in prison. So they've taken this kind of colorful mascot-ish character, adapted it for early 2000s era gaming, which is more action-oriented, more teen-oriented. And what was child-friendly is now kind of teen-oriented. And Jack is just immediately a badass. And he has a goatee now. And there's guns. This is the Shadow the Hedgehog of this. I knew coming into this was going to be a Shadow the Hedgehog-ish vibe kind of game. But it went so hard. Okay, you have a skateboard now, a hoverboard, and there's a skate park where you have to do a mandatory trick mission. You have guns now, 4 different guns you can use throughout the campaign. Jack, he's angry. His whole attitude is completely different. He's basically been, and it's not only that he's been in prison for 2 years, he's been tortured by the Baron, injected with dark eco. And so he even has a dark mode that allows him to essentially use dark powers, like peak teen gaming, peak angst vibes. And so essentially Jack's power up, what it actually does is it's just called Dark Jack, and what it does is, I hate to say it, but it's literally the same mechanics as Sonic Unleashed. Where Sonic turns into the werehog. Essentially, Jack, it's always funny that he always has these Crash Bandicoot moves, especially the spinning one. We all know what that move is if you've seen Crash. And so when he goes into his dark form, it's more moves like that. It's more melee stuff. He can use his guns, and he just kind of attacks directly, with just more power. And he goes way larger, way bigger hitboxes, all that good stuff. And so maybe I have to talk a little bit about the guns now. So throughout the game, you unlock the guns through story missions progressively. The first one you get is the scatter shot, which is a shotgun. Then the blaster, which is kind of like a sniper, a long-range rifle. Then there's the Vulcan, which is a chain gun. And finally the Peacemaker, which is just it's a rocket launcher, but it's basically like a nuke. It does an AoE kind of, Doom BFG style kind of attack. And you get it near the end of the game, very limited ammo, so it's kind of like a big deal, right? And so this arsenal of weapons, it's weird that they have this ammo counter, and it keeps, it has a, what do you say, the images of the bullets, and it's decreasing, so it looks like you have to reload, but there's no reloading. You just blast as much as you want with no reloading. You can fire as much as you want, basically. And all the guns in the game, they have essentially limited ammo, so you have 50 bullets, 100 bullets, and you just have to use them per situation, and you just have to find usually copious amounts of ammo in the boxes around the world, which is not an issue. I guess also the item currency has also changed, so when you defeat any enemy, you also get this dark eco matter that charges up Jack's dark meter. And it's interesting that it feels very imbalanced in a sense, because it takes a lot of dark eco to charge up his dark meter, and when you finally get it charged, it's really not that useful. There are other ways to essentially upgrade your dark powers throughout the game by bringing these metalhead gems to this deity that gives you new powers. The first one you get is definitely the best, where you jump and press, attack in the air, and you do this huge AoE that destroys everything, which honestly is more effective than actually taking guys on one by one. And you eventually get other things like invincibility and giant mode and all these crazy kind of like glitch Easter egg kind of things, which brings us to the second currency, which is that there are still precursor orbs in this game, but they're treated more like actual hidden collectibles, what Easter eggs typically are, which kind of I said I had a disagreement with the philosophy of what we call Easter eggs, because what Easter eggs should be are the very common things you find hidden throughout the level rather than the super hidden one-off things, but that's what they're more like now. And so again, the precursor orbs, they're really weird because they're definitely harder to find now. They're not in groups, there's kind of one-off things, and they don't really do anything. It's very weird. They don't count towards 100% completion, and what they unlock are things like artwork, and then funny little cheats like big head mode. You can remove Jack's goatee, small head mode, and other weird funny glitches. And by the end of the game I had around 50-ish, and apparently there's 200, so definitely they are hidden. They are definitely hidden very well, and there's really no incentive to get them besides the comical nature of the things you can get. So it's very much an extra game kind of thing, a post game kind of thing, if you really want to. And so, of course, the other thing I was saying, the metalhead orbs. So the main enemies in this game, besides the guards, are these things called metalheads, which are these animalistic kind of metal creatures that have these giant yellow orbs on their head. And when you kill them, you basically get these orbs, and you use them as currency, essentially, to go to this deity, as I said, to upgrade your dark powers. That's pretty much the only use they have, but they're basically the main currency in the game, and it's only for one use, and they're very strange because they only drop from enemies. It's very unusual, because what happens is these are the main... How do I say this? They're the limited fixed currency. It's not like, so when you go into an area and you defeat all the enemies and you get the yellow orbs and they all respawn when you go back there, they don't drop the orbs anymore. So you can't farm these. They're a one-time thing, and they drop from enemies. And because of that, there are certain contingencies in place. So if a yellow orb falls off a cliff, for example, there's some programming to make it fly back up. You do not want to miss these at all, because by the end of the game, if you're missing a few, you can't get the final upgrade, which again, I don't know how stringent they are about how, because if you go into each mission, how is it hard to get, because you're doing the final boss, and I only got the final power after the final boss because I had just enough. I had literally had one more than to get the last upgrade. So it seems to be a very strange thing to make a limited resource enemy dependent, especially when you can miss enemies or go around enemies. It kind of makes it feel like you don't really need to get this, because the variability of missing it is really so high. But I digress. For the weapons themselves, they do technically upgrade, but again, it's through doing story missions that don't really correlate. You just do a story mission and suddenly, you have a damage boost, or you have an ammo boost, and that just happened. It's not really intentional, which I thought was kind of weird, because there are side missions around the city that do this race, do this mission, fight off these guys or whatever, and again, they're weird because they don't count towards 100% completion. Or actually, I think they do. Now that I think about it, because when I beat the game, I had 101% completion, and I only did a few of them. So maybe I'm thinking maybe they do count towards that. But it doesn't seem like they do. It doesn't seem any direct reward to them. Maybe it's something I have to look into. But the point is that they were just missions I had no interest in doing. And it's simply because that what they ask you to do are things that you've done a million times before. And yeah, so this is the one issue I have with Jak II, is that it's a really cool setting. It's a very cool, honestly, I love the driving mechanics. I love the ships and the lanes and how they move. And what's really smart is how do they do the lane system. So you press R2 to either hover in the top lane or the bottom lane. And so it's super interesting. So in the top lane, it's normal traffic. You have to weave in between all the other floating cars and whatever. But if you go down to ground level, essentially, and yeah, there are some cars you bump into, some that blow up. But on the bottom level, you just run into civilians. And that's fine, actually, until you run into a guard. And when you run into a guard, the alert goes off, and then everyone's chasing you down. And one of the very first missions forces you to drive on the ground. And so you realize kind of quickly, it's actually much better and easier to drive on the ground, because while you have to worry about navigating the corners and the geography of the city, you don't have to worry about going into other traffic. And when the consequence of flying into other guards and them shooting at you, it really doesn't do that much damage to your speeder. So it's actually kind of the de facto way that I played most of this game. It's just driving on the ground, almost intentionally running into guards just so I could change the music. And that's the other thing I really have an issue with Jak II, and I had this with Jak I, is the music is just awful. I was saying that this game reminded me of Cyberpunk. One of the peak moments I had with this game is going to sound settings, disabling the music, and blasting the Cyberpunk OST, spoiler by Hyper. It actually fits really, really well. And again, this brings me back to Jack's characterization and how he's changed. Cyberpunk, another thing that definitely reminded me of Jak. So he was this little boy, this innocent kid, and now he's a renegade badass that wields guns. Like, if anyone has seen the show Reboot, that's literally Enzo and his character arc. And that's just the energy this character has and this game has, and I love it. It's fantastic because it goes in that direction and it owns it. I don't know how to describe. It's not fake about it. Like, it's such a different shift, but it's genuine about it. And what's interesting, it still has that DNA from the first game, because you still have Daxter, who is the same essentially comic relief character who lightens up the mood and changes the tone and does certain things. And he's honestly a lot of fun, and sometimes he's annoying, but he's like a decent character. And I think it's funny because right now people are complaining about the Metroid Prime 4 support side character and how awful that is. And these characters, they've technically always existed. Someone brought up Fear, the big fat ginger guy who's the IT guy who is kind of helps you. These characters have always existed, and they're not exactly great, but they're not bad either. They just kind of add to it. And Daxter's personality is fantastic. And of course, that's the other thing. Jak, not only does he say, "I'm going to kill Praxis," but that's the first thing he says. So he actually talks in this one. Finally, it's kind of like how would I say? It's kind of like, oh right, finally, this character now has a voice. But it's just funny that he said, say anything, in the sense that before this, he was canonically mute. That he just, there's like game logic, and then there's lore logic. Did Jak just never talk in the first game? Did they not hire a voice actor? Was he just supposed to be a silent protagonist? I don't know. But in this game, there's like, okay, look, he has a goatee. He has to say something. Kind of idea. And so, yeah, the main story as it reveals is Jak wakes up. He wants revenge on the Baron. And he finds out that Kira, Samos, and other characters are essentially in this universe. And so he's to find his friends, regroup. And basically he ends up joining the Resistance first. And so for joining the Resistance, they want to defeat the Baron. And so Jak also goes along with them and helps them fight the Baron. And again, there's other characters he meets, like the merchant one, I forget his name, but the guy in the floating chair, Crew. He is he's kind of a main character in the game for how much he shows up, and he's kind of this gross, ugly Harkonnen pod floating disabled merchant underground guy who doesn't have allegiance to the Baron or the Resistance, and he just wants, he's in it for profit, and you kind of become the main guy for him. It's kind of similar to a GTA opening where it's like, okay, we're going to work for the lowly level 1 mafia guy for our first series of missions, but he's like there throughout the whole game to the point where you actually get to fight him. So he's actually kind of a good villain, I would say, because he's kind of an ally villain, kind of rival kind of thing. And yeah, he just takes up so much screen time. He's kind of the main villain in this game. You barely see the Baron. And that's the other thing. At the end of the game, it's kind of anticlimactic because the Baron that you've been chasing this whole time actually gets betrayed by the leader of the Metalheads, which was actually posing as a member of the Renegade team so that he could destabilize the city and take it over. So the guy who you've implicitly been working for this whole time is actually the real big bad guy, and he kills the Baron. So it's this weird thing where the powers and the things that were done to you by this other guy are giving you, I don't know, the demon energy to become the hero of the story and defeat the real big bad. And he's like, Jack, I'm sorry for everything, but this is what I did to you. This is what you were made for. And it's this weird thing where it's actually very nuanced. You were abused and tormented by this guy, but that in the end is what saves you. Like that's actually kind of crazy. It's what saves everyone. It's I think there's maybe a much deeper meaning I'm trying to maybe put in here, but I thought it was very nuanced and actually very interesting that especially you have this double, triple crossing scenario going on. The ending of the game was actually pretty surprising, but yeah. The beginning of the game, the first chapters, you're just going around the city doing stuff. Now, I will say one good thing is that it's very clear on where you have to go, usually. Like, there's always a marker on your map. The only issue is that the map moves with you. Like, it'll rotate, and then as you enter a new area, your objective marker will, like, flip almost 180 degrees, because as you get closer, it's telling you, it's geolocating almost like a waypoint where you have to go in that map to get to the other one. So that actually makes sense, because if it may work the other way, you might keep running into dead ends all the time. So I think it's actually better than what it could have been, but it was still a little bit confusing, I would say. But I think they made the right choice with that. Again, of course, GTA has an actual waypoint thing, which wouldn't come until GTA San Andreas, I think. But yeah, a lot of this game is listening to the exact same music, similar to the Sly series. This game is twice as long as the first game. The first game was a kind of 9 to 10 hour thing. This was 19 hours. So definitely a lot longer, definitely a lot more stuff to do. And again, it still had that GTA feeling. I don't know if anyone has experienced this. When you're actually playing GTA and you're doing the main story missions, you'll meet with a guy, they'll have a conversation, a little anecdote, a quirky line or something, and then they'll be like, okay, go and, rile up the cops or something. And you get on the mission, and it turns out you're stealing a tank. You're like, wait, what? There's always been this ludo dissonance between what I'm told in the cutscene and then what I actually have to do. Is like, okay, go scare this guy. Like, okay, I have to beat him up. No, tie him to your windshield and drive him around in oncoming traffic. Like, it's always kind of like we have a cutscene and I just have no idea what we're actually doing until we get into the gameplay. And it's very similar with Jak. It's like, okay, you have to do this smuggling run, and it's really collect a bunch of things in succession until you get all of them. And so yeah, that beginning part of the game, I think I had issues with it just because the music does not change. The music is the music for 19 hours, and it's really, really terrible. And that's why I had to sometimes put on other music. It's just not good. The music in Jak is notoriously underwhelming, if not just bad. So I really wish it wasn't the case. I wish it was better. Playing other music definitely helped, but it's one thing that this game really, really does not have and is missing, frankly. Because the gameplay is really good. Speaking of the gameplay, some of the missions involve gimmick kind of things. Like you have to drive around the city, collect baggage. There's turret sections, there's racing sections, there's a whole race arc. There's also this section where you have a Titan. Again, you get a hoverboard. And the hoverboard is actually cool because you can use it at any time you want. The only thing I wish you could do is shoot while on the hoverboard. You can also shoot while riding a vehicle, though. That's really cool. Like, that's actually GTA. I'm sorry, as a main mechanic in GTA, you're in a vehicle and you can shoot from that vehicle optionally. That's whenever you want. That's a very GTA kind of thing. And so there are a lot of missions that revolve around that, racing around the city. I actually really liked the little race segments where you have this short track. You essentially use the same mechanics as you would if you were in the city, but it's just on a very tight track, and there's certain shortcuts you can take. You can boost, you can jump over things. It's a 5-lap thing. And it's just one race. Well, there's 3 of them technically, but it's just, you do them sequentially, basically, different parts of the game. And I kind of enjoy them. They were getting pretty enjoyable. I think the peak moment of this game, though, for me at least, was before the third and final race. The rival racer who meets you outside the Coliseum challenges you to a pre-race through the city. And that feels really good. That feels kind of like a culmination of the game, because, like, let's be honest, most of the game you've just been racing and navigating the city using these speeders and runners and whatever. And this pre-final race thing it's testing your entire knowledge of the city. You're doing one gigantic race throughout the whole area that is vehicle based, and it feels fantastic. It feels really good. And you also, the added difficulties that you have to hit these rings, and God, the turning, the swerving on these vehicles is pretty frustrating, where you just, like, you think you can swerve into it, you can never swerve into it. You have to go straight through, which is how it's done. But yeah, it felt like the final test, and it felt good to really have, this rival mechanic. It was a pretty cool mission. I think that's where the game honestly peaked. And then, yeah, you have these other missions where you go out into the outskirts and you kind of do, recycles, and, they kind of send you back there. Now there's a new area, or now there's a new, like a Titan mech there, or there's some other thing. And that also brings me to the other thing that I really despise about this game in some cases, was the checkpoint system. So when you go into these mission areas, oh boy, you don't know where the checkpoint is. And there were some missions where I was doing them, and like the checkpoint system was like good. It was like, okay, beginning of this room, checkpoint. Beginning of that room, checkpoint. It doesn't tell you. There's literally no save icon. There's nothing to tell you that it's making a checkpoint there. But there were some missions where you get like halfway through the level and you die, and you start at the very beginning. That is frustrating as hell, because again, you don't know how far back it's going to send you. And I think it's like the second or third last mission where you're in the catacombs with Sid, and you're basically running away from this giant bug centipede thing. You have, oh my god, that is the worst level. It is terrible, because what you have the introduction sequence with a puzzle, then you have a chase sequence where you have to perfectly platform, the roots of Crash Bandicoot, perfectly platform through this section. And it's funny, when I first started, I thought, okay, I know what this is, because the last one we had a boulder section with Daxter, where you have to run forward. It's going to be the exact same thing. So I immediately started running towards the screen, downwards. And that's immediately where the bug spawns. It actually wants you to run up away from it. So I was like, okay. So you have a puzzle, you have a chase scene, then you have another puzzle, and then another chase scene. There are no checkpoints in this 4-section run. It puts you at the very start, or actually, telling there's an intro part that doesn't matter, but it puts you basically at the very start. That was the most resets I had, and it was really super frustrating and odd. There are bosses in this game. They're fine. The final boss was fine. Honestly, I thought it was going to have a second form when it like brought out its wings, but it just like flew into a thing and died like a giant bug. The ending of the game also is like Dax, because there's like, oh, this person's actually this person from the future, and this person's actually this person. It's kind of obvious, but Daxter makes the comment like, oh, don't think about it too much or it'll hurt your brain, because they just like, okay, whatever, there's a time dilation thing, we have to send ourselves into the past so that the future can be renewed, basically. And says the thing, oh, I built the time machine in the future, sending it back to the past, kind of deal. It's like, okay, that doesn't matter, don't worry about it. Just setting up for the Jak III. And it's funny because they do kind of tease Jak III. They kind of say, oh, there's this fortune teller lady who speaks about future predictions and saying, oh, Jak is like, I'm done with adventures. Like, oh no, you're not. I've seen what you've done, kind of thing. So So there's that. I guess on that, I'm not a huge fan of comic relief characters, but there is one character in this game called Pecker. So you have this oracle woman who can't speak, and so she says everything through this parrot. But the parrot has his own personality, and so she'll be saying like, oh yeah, she's saying you have to go to the trials of the ancient blah blah blah. It's actually really funny because you have this guy who's interpreting for her, but he's also adding his own thing where he just doesn't care about it, and he's completely self-centered, and he has this little rivalry with Jack. He's a legitimately very funny character. I actually really enjoyed him throughout the game. There's also other characters like this mad scientist guy who's super paranoid about everything. You also have the Baron's daughter, who is actually part of the Resistance, and she's this kind of badass character. You have, I believe, Thorn, who's the first Resistance guy you meet, who shows you the ropes. You have Samos, who goes by the Shadow in this universe, as he's part of the Resistance. And so there's a pretty decent cast of characters. Again, it just felt like the game might have gone a little bit too long. There were some missions that near the end of the game, you just show up and you kill 15 enemies and you leave. Like, it's so simple. And like the earlier missions in the game, you have to like go throughout the whole level, take out a battalion of guys, activate something, go to the next area. And so it's kind of funny that the missions get shorter, and I think they keep up a good variety. I think a really interesting one was where they were specifically the hoverboard missions, where you have to basically go into this eco mine and skate up these ramps to throw grenades into these mine shafts. And it's kind of like you have to hit every ramp before the time limit exceeds. So that was a lot of fun. When you first get the hoverboard, actually, you have to do you have the skate park, and you have to do a bunch of tricks. I think you can replay it like later in the game, but I'm not exactly sure. But it was kind of weird that, oh cool, you designed this whole trick system and how the skateboard works, and I kind of got frustrated with it. I just ended up spamming like tricks by the end of it, because I just couldn't get all the tricks to work. But it was kind of cool, like we were developing the skill set, so much of the vehicle skill set and the racing thing, which like paid off throughout the game, but they never revisited the skateboarding thing, which was kind of a shame. I wasn't crazy about it, but I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. I kind of expected there'd be more of this. The skateboarding mechanics, yeah, they definitely had issues where the biggest issue is that I'd hold square to grind on a rail, and then it would suddenly just stop and I'd fall off. Like, was it supposed to tap it? No, because then I would fall off. Was it supposed to hold it? Was the direction I'm aiming? I never got that memo. So sometimes I would just end up falling off and dying, which is frustrating. The one thing I do have to give it credit for is, the platforming that's based on Crash. I remember Crash, very forgiving platforming, in the sense that I would be literally off the platform and I could still jump. So that there was some of that there, where I was you have to navigate your skateboard or hoverboard in this last section of the game. And I ended up it has a lot of inertia, right? So I ended up going over the edge. I jump off the skateboard, and somehow I grab the ledge, which is like, thank God. So there's a lot of, I think, safety there, but you still die a lot from falling. Honestly, that's how you mostly die in this game, is from falling, and also depth perception. There's just a lot of ledges like, yeah, I can't jump to that. Turns out, yes, you can. Or there's ledges, oh, I can jump to that. No, you can't. Just luck of the draw, random. The one thing I do have to really hone in on, though, and give kudos for, is the vehicle sound effects. Oh my God. I mean, when I talked about the whole cyberpunk aesthetic, it's really the vehicles in this game. You get in a speeder, it has this jingling of keys, this engine startup sound. It sounds like a pod racer or something literally out of Star Wars, and has this nice revving engine sound, and you're blasting around the city. You have this afterburner sound effect. It sounds really great. Just the sound of the vehicles, how they interact. It's a lot of fun. There's a little bit frustrating, though. If you're ever in a Zoomer or in a bike or anything, you will die in a couple hits. And conversely, however, if you're in a speeder or a large, armored carrier, then you can basically hit every motorcycle with one hit, and it'll fall out of the sky and explode. It's very consistent in that aspect. And so it's interesting, throughout the game, again, Jack still has his badass, angsty nature. He's very antagonistic. He's very hostile. He's very, oh, I hate authority and I have guns now kind of thing. What's interesting, though, is at the end of the game is, he has his future self who is this little boy, and basically he needs to save him or redeem this boy who they think is the leader of the resistance, because he has the original, he's the original heir to the actual kingdom that they're in. And so there's this whole thing that when you defeat the final metalhead, there's a precursor who's kind of alive as this being of light hologram that comes out of this orb that you've collected, and it basically says Jack's darker nature has been redeemed through saving the light of the younger inner self, which is like, oh yeah, that's actually a very intense metaphor that a lot of really great piece of literature and other things try to hit on, that the younger inner child self is still intact, and that light is what saves him in the end. I kind of wish they did something with that rather than just saying it, that they showed it, but I was like, okay, whatever, and then it ends with fireworks and everyone's happy. I think I should also mention, besides the main vehicles, there were a surprising amount of interesting mini games in this game. For example, there's when you go to Onan the Oracles, you have to do a bunch of rhythm mini games. You have to hit all of the shaped button inputs. There's one that I don't want to say is iconic, but to me it was iconic, that you have this whack-a-mole game with Daxter. With some reason it just stood out to my mind for some reason. It's just a normal mini game you see in any other thing, but watching Daxter play whack-a-mole, I don't know, there's something iconic about that. It kind of stuck out in my mind as oh yeah, this is the whack-a-mole one where you play as Daxter whack-a-mole. It was like a one-off thing, but for some reason it stood out to me. But anyway, how would I rate Jak II? Well, it's definitely better than Jak I, I'll say that, but it's a little bit too long. The music is super repetitive, not engaging. These songs have no melody. They barely have an melody. They're dum 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 dum. That's the main city music. Dum 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 dum. It is abysmally shocking. It is shocking how much putting any other music over Jak II gameplay is an immediate improvement. So there's that. Again, the city is pretty detailed. I mean, it's not obviously not HD. Some places are very simplistic, but they kind of work. The one thing that always bothered me, sorry, just as I'm ranting now, there are a series of thatch roof houses that your vehicle can fly over, but there's just one of them you can't, and it's just, there's no reason why. For some reason you have to. It looks exactly like the other ones that you all fly over automatically, but for some reason this thatch roof you have to drive around. The only thing that would solve it is just turn into another skyscraper so you don't think you can drive over it. But for whatever reason they said, yep, no, you can't drive over this one. So okay, whatever. It's okay, it's fine. Jak II is okay. I kind of felt that going into this, that I feel like Jak is just part of PS2 DNA. I just have this impression that everyone who owned a PS2 owned Jak or owned some form of Jak at some point. It appealed to the zeitgeist so well of the time that I just can't really ignore it. It again, and Jak II represents that transition from mascot game characters to, I'm not sure what to call it, normal game characters. I can't say Jak is too humanoid and too animated. I mean, he's definitely not human. He's like an elf thing, but he's somewhere in between, right? But he's not he's not Blorbo the Schmuggle or something. He's Jak. He has a more humanified attributes, with the tinge of anthro aspect to it. But yeah, Jak II is fine. It's good. I guess I enjoy playing it. I was honestly more happy that it was over. I had no interest in doing the side missions or in all this other stuff. I was just happy to get 101% completion and just finishing the game and moving on, just because I think it's part of the compendium of the PS2 as an identity. So yeah, that's Jak II, and I'm glad it's done, and I'll see Jak III later. Bye.